Wow, what a fantastic and informative panel, and the resources you heard about throughout the panel and you saw on the screen, please use them and please pass them on. And I had a really great question from Mrs. George about, are the resources going to be posted on the website? So we will get them, they're not there currently, but we will get them posted for you and put on the website and out on social media. Some of them are in the resource digital swag bag that we talked about, the QR code that's on your question card. Some are in there, but we will get the rest of these out there for you. So hopefully you had a chance to take a picture of them. So we are not taking a break, and we are transitioning, talk about transformation as our theme. We are transforming in our readiness, and it continues, right, as we into our next forum. So please welcome the moderator of our panel, Dr. Becky Porter. She's the Chief Executive Officer for the Military Child Education Coalition. MSEC's mission supports all military-connected children by educating, advocating, and collaborating to resource education challenges associated with the military life. Welcome, Dr. Porter.
No, I'll just go over here. Should I wait for everyone to leave and then get started? Okay. Hi, if our panelists could go ahead and come up, I'll try to save us some time by introducing you as you come up and get seated. First, we have Mr. Pete Lupiba, who is the Ohio State Commissioner for Military Interstate Compact and also a founder of the Purple Star School designation. Next to him, we have Ms. Lori Pickle, who is the Acting Chief Academic Officer from the Department of Defense Education Activity, and then Ms. Fatima Muhammad, who's the Director for Impact Aid at the Department of Education, and Ms. Bridget Plummer, who is the School Liaison Officer for Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I'm going to let the folks tell you a little bit about what they do next, but I first want to start by telling you that the G9 and AUSA have really done an amazing job here of putting together a panel of experts in the field of military education, or education for military kids, rather. And the perspectives that you're going to hear go all the way from the federal level. They include the Department of Defense Education Activity, all the way down to the boots on the ground that school liaison officers provide for military families. And so I really hope that you'll take advantage of this opportunity to hear from some experts at all levels of the field of education for our military kids. And I'll start by asking Mr. Lupiba to say a little bit about what he does.
Thank you, Dr. Porter. Thank you, Team MSEC, and of course, for this forum, thank you, Team AUSA. My name is Pete Lupiba. Once upon a time, I was junior enlisted Navy in Washington State. A lot of Ohio roots, Buckeye roots. We are hurting because of Oregon, what they did to us a few nights ago. But Buckeye Nation continues, and honored to serve in 2006 with the United States Army's 101st Airborne at Cobb Spiker when I was there with EOD MU-11. And so in 2012, I was appointed by the governor to become the MIC-3 commissioner and reappointed by the Honorable Mike DeWine, governor, in 2019. And it was that council that organized the Purple Star School Award, the first in the nation, back in 2015 through 17.
Thanks. Go ahead, Ms. Pickle. Yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Lori Pickle, and I am going to pull off of the Navy piece, a spouse of 30 years military Navy family. That started me in my quest of education in Department of Defense education activity, affectionately known as DODEA. Started as a teacher in classrooms, worked through the Department of Defense as every set of orders, new place, new time. For me, pre-K-12 education in the Department of Defense has been an amazing opportunity for all of our children. We like to say in DODEA, in 24 hours, there's only 10 minutes in a time zone that we aren't serving children pre-K to 12. So a little bit more about DODEA. We are in 3 regions, 11 countries, 7 states, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So 60 military installations that you will find Department of Defense education activity schools. Thank you again for having me today.
Thanks, Ms. Pickle. Ms. Fatima?
All right, thank you so much.
Mohammed.
It's okay. I am Fatima Mohammed, the Director for Impact Aid. That's the big Impact Aid at the U.S. Department of Education with a $1.6 billion budget that still isn't fully funded. But I'm just going to continue the little Navy tradition here. Sorry. Lori and I have worked together before. I've worked at DODEA previously, but my dad served in the Navy, and I say I am the woman today because of the example and the role model that he was in my life about commitment, honor, and serving. And my service has always been to education, from the time I would take frogs out of my backyard and try to put lipstick on them and teach them. So I am a science teacher by trade with my undergrad focused in biology and chemistry. Then I went into administration. So I've worked the gamut in education, from a classroom teacher to what I'm doing now at the U.S. Department of Education. I've always had a passion for what we call special populations, such as our military child, our gifted children, our special ed children. I've even overseen foster care, homeless education, English learners at the department. Wherever they ask me to serve, I have served in those areas, and I try to give 110% at those times. So it's an honor to be here, and hopefully I could bestow some information upon you about Impact Aid and any other questions you may have at this time. And on the last slide, you will see our contact information. My staff's responsibility is to respond within 24 hours of any inquiry. So if anything we don't get to, please feel free to reach out. But it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Ms. Plummer?
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Plummer. I am your boots on the ground. So I am a school liaison at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. We're a mid-sized training installation. I serve 10 different school districts, 2 private schools, and the homeschool community. If you're not familiar with what a school liaison does, we have 5 basic goals, and that's transition and deployment support, partners in education, installation and school communication, homeschool supports, and then also post-secondary education and supporting that goal. So we do a lot of that at Fort Leonard Wood. We have amazing support from our community, but hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions for the school liaison side of things as I work with all of these experts to bring these down to the local level.
Thank you. And I guess after hearing those introductions, I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the fact that I'm actually retired Army. So there is an Army connection sitting up here. Bridget, you Army?
Yeah, I'm an Army spouse of 22 years.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Purple.
All right.
We're purple.
Yeah, we're purple. We're purple. We're Army. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but what I would like to invite the panelists, if somebody else is answering a question and there's something that comes up that you think from your foxhole, Army reference, from your foxhole, there's something you'd like to add, please don't hesitate to jump in. And I'm going to start with Mr. Lupiba because he is, in our field, what's considered the grandfather of Purple Star schools. Okay, father of Purple Star schools. So, Mr. Lupiba, could you tell us a little bit about the military impacted compact, or military compact for kids, and how that kind of rolled into Purple Star schools and what that is?
Yes, ma'am. In the beginning of 2015, our state council knew the charge of MIC-3, as in transcripts, record of our active duty military connected students. But it kept coming up, well, what if it's mid-school year and they're wondering where is their locker when they PCS in the middle of the hallway? Because they didn't start that school year with wherever they're going. Where are they going to sit at lunch? And so we figured bigger military states than us, where I once served upon, and the West Coast would have something that we could easily cut and paste and make it our own from Lake Erie to the Ohio River. But as 2015 went on into 2016, we found out that there wasn't, and that we would make our own by having focus groups across that year with every branch of service. We are Air Force heavy, proud of our Air Force roots. My father was United States Air Force, but we want to make sure that when we made it Ohio's own, that every branch of service was represented, and including spouses, service members, military kids at that point in time. And of course, the great nonprofits, just like MSEC out of Texas, were at the table, but most importantly, the Professional Educators Associations, right? The School Counselors Association of Ohio, the principals and superintendents and school board members. So that's kind of where we came up in that incubator, if you will, of our State Council of MIC3, and developed the Purple Star School Award and launched it in Month of the Military Child 2017 at the National Museum of the Air Force. So it was the MIC3 pretty much leading the way here in the Buckeye State to the Purple Star School Award.
Thanks for that. Can you, for the audience, can you just real briefly say what is MIC3 and what do they do? Sure.
So essentially in 2008, 9, 10, about a dozen states came together with great leadership by the U.S. Department of Defense, the Council of State Governments, MSEC, Military Child Education Coalition, and said, okay, they are going to PCS, our great, beautiful, strong, resilient military kids, and they're going to be in different states when they go to different bases. So why can't we get together and say, let's not penalize them when they arrive, and it's going to be 6 to 9 times across a K-12 experience. So can we come up with a 50+1 compact? And it was quick for those dozen states to come together. And then I think it was the fall of 2014, the last state. So we were truly 50+1. About August of this year makes, I think, our 10th anniversary, or 1 decade strong, that we have that state law, the MIC3, in every one of our states, protecting our active duty youth as they PCS, that they would not be penalized and have to start curriculum, courses, et cetera, over again once they got to a new school.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Muhammad.
I just want to stress the importance of this, especially for parents and all military folks to be aware of this. When I first went to DODEA, the director told me I needed to write, I forgot what it was, something because the tsunami hit Japan. And we had children leaving Okinawa and other places that had to come back to the States and go to school anywhere grandma was. So I was receiving calls from State Department folks saying, okay, telling them you're going to get these students arriving. They must be treated fairly. They must be given the opportunity for AP exams. If they identify for gifted, identify for special education. So knowledge is power. Understanding that there is this compact in place and you should be aware of it as you transition from location to location. And that doesn't just apply to their education, but students also participate in extracurricular and do other types of activities for the whole child. So I think the work that you're doing is phenomenal. And I know Secretary Cardona wrote a letter in the support for the department for the work for the interstate compact. So,
and we may know the MIC3, but a lot of people outside this room, the newly arrived, the junior enlisted don't. The school counselors in a new state, especially if they're far away from the great profession of school liaisons and bases and installations. So we really have to implement MIC3 every day we can.
Thanks for that, and thanks for kind of bringing this, kind of highlighting for us that a lot of times our kids are coming from overseas back to CONUS, and so that makes me think about DODEA, and I want to turn to Ms. Pickle now and say, okay, there's like a repetitive nature and re-education of folks, but there's something new happening in DODEA, and it's universal pre-K. So tell us a little bit about how that is impacting early childhood education outcomes, and what are some of the strategies behind early pre-K?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And this is a banner year that DODEA did become. We went from pre-K for some through 12th grade to now we are truly a pre-K-12 educational system. Took us about 10 years to get there. We are part of the Secretary of Defense Taking Care of People initiative, in which we looked at equity and equity for families as that, as we just said, that transition and setting our youngest learners up for a strong foundation across the board. So within the Department of Defense, as I said earlier, we have 7 states as well as our overseas CONUS locations. And our 7 states have a universal pre-K program that was like 20 years old as far as a half-day program to the different pieces. So as an agency, we looked at what does a high-quality universal pre-K program look like? And through that, we spent, our joke is that we spent 11 years to get there and 8 months to get it ready and up and going. So we have deployed in 80 schools. We have universal pre-K across our way. We've got 10 schools left. Looks like we're gonna get 5 next year. And then the last 5 are due to MILCOM and making sure that we have appropriate facilities for those children. We know that the college and career ready journey begins at birth. And when can we get our youngest children into the academic setting? That's one, going to build their resiliency and their foundations to do this thing we call school, to get us to that readiness for not only career, college, but citizenship. And what does that look like? So we spent a great deal of time preparing for that. We've hired over 228 teachers. We've hired paraprofessionals. We've trained them. We've put all of our facilities together and are ready to roll. And now we're beginning that journey so that college and career readiness can begin at the age of 4.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And as I think about the kind of support that has to happen for those sorts of programs, and I'm thinking tax support, I want to transition over to Ms. Muhammad from Department of Education. Can you tell us a little bit about Impact Aid? And I'll just open it up like that.
Okay. Impact Aid is the most complex education program in that every student succeeds at. It is the oldest. It's older than Title I or any other program you've heard of. It's supported bipartisanly, so there's a lot of twists and turns and provisions in the law. It's just hit its mark of 74 years. So just to give you that background, Impact Aid, some people refer to it as Uncle Sam paying his taxes. Impact Aid was to replace lost tax revenue for school districts that are impacted by federal presence. That federal presence can be in the form of a military installation, Indian land, tribal land, low rent housing, labs, national parks. If you think about your tax dollars in any school district across the United States that isn't impacted by federal presence, they generate their tax revenue from homes and businesses. And that money goes into the general purpose for that particular town, or county, or city. The schools that are on federal property, they're not generating any tax revenue. So that's the purpose of that funding, to replace that lost tax revenue. We always get questions about what is the funding used for. Just like your tax revenue, it goes into general funds, you vote, you make determinations, but it doesn't, your tax revenue doesn't go to your child, it doesn't go to your child or your child. It goes into this pool of general funding, and it pays for teacher salaries, it pays for renovation, it pays for the school bus, it pays for changes to programs, curriculum, resources. That's the purpose of Impact Aid. The children So we call those schools federally connected schools. The children are what we call federally connected children, meaning the spouse is active duty. They could be living on base, living off base, civilians working on base, living on tribal land. So the formula is a really funky, complex formula. It's weighted per 10 calories, 10 categories. I just got off a plane. 10 categories of different children. So that's where the money goes. I know a lot of time the military families or spouses may have questions. Why isn't it going directly to my child? My tribal communities ask the same question. The tribal leaders want to know, why isn't the tribe dictating where that money goes? My thing is, just as you would be involved in your child's education, that's where your impact is for how and what your local schools do with that general funding. So I hope that answers the bigger question: what's the intent of impact aid? What's the purpose? How's the money generated? And what can it be used for? Mm-hmm. We have two other categories, which is a little weedy. I'm not going to go that far into it, but we have a construction fund and a special education fund in the section of the law. In those two situations, that money must be used for construction and it must be used for special education services. Not saying just your child, but for the services overall.
Right.
So I hope that provides some clarity. And the program that the Department of Education offers or implements is a formula program, and the number of children enrolled in schools changes annually. Mm-hmm. So therefore, that's why you see that parent-pupil survey form come home every year. Your children, just being military children, transition from school to school. So think about it, if this school had 1,000 kids, but 10% moved over here due to deployment or something else, then this school here can't claim those federally connected children. So that's some of the complexity of how the formula works. And the privacy surrounding the way in which we collect that information, the local schools have to ensure privacy, the states, and my program staff have to ensure privacy with that information that is only used to make determination for how much money will go to that particular school district.
So, Ms. Muhammad, thanks for bringing up that pupil survey form and the privacy that surrounds it. Mm-hmm. I'd like to foot stomp that if I could, just mm-hmm. or ask you to. So, the importance of filling it out, and it mm-hmm. sounds to me like what there might be some parents who don't fill it out because they think that information gets dispersed somehow, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they think. It's either they think that information may be shared, or their particular duty may be shared, or their mission may be shared, and it shouldn't be because of what the parent's particular mission is, or because the money's not going to their individual child. They don't understand that you educate all the children in the school. It's beneficial to every child in that school. Mm-hmm. So that's the best way I could explain it. And if you want a sidebar when we're finished here about a particular situation or case, I'm more than willing to do that. And hopefully that answers that question. But yeah. I've never had an issue. I've been in this position for, oh goodness, 5 years. I took the impact aid position. I've been at the department longer than that. Since the pandemic, and we are constantly making enhancements to our electronic system where we collect the data from school systems, and we have to adhere to all the security measures. Right now, on a scale of 1 to 3, my security measures for my system, 3 being the highest, is a 3. So it's about accountability. and responsibility of ensuring that.
Thank you. Thank you. So Ms. Plummer, it's coming to you right now. You've heard from DODEA, you've heard from the Military Interstate Compact Commission, and a little bit about Purple Star Schools. We're going to go back to that. And you've heard about Impact Aid. So what does all of that have to do with being a school liaison officer? Can you tell us what a school liaison officer does?
Yeah, so the primary role that I think we do most often is going to be that transition support. So families moving into or out of our areas, making sure that they have school supports, they know where they're going, they've been connected with their school counselors if need be. I do that a couple ways at Fort Leonard Wood. I do get an in-processing roster once a month of families that are coming in 30, 60, 90 days in advance. I get very basic information. It's their name, it's their email address, and it goes to the service member, and it tells me if they're coming accompanied or unaccompanied and when their report date is. I take that and I email every single one of those families that's coming accompanied. I don't know if they have an infant. I don't know if that accompanied is just their spouse, but they're going to get information that, hey, Missouri is not a school of choice state. These are your options for registration. We have a great homeschool community. These are all of the things that you should probably know before you get here. And please share this with your spouse if you're not the person that makes those decisions in your household. I average about 150 to 300 emails a month that I send to these families. My most I've received back is 7. So I've gotten 7 responses in any given month from spouses that say, hey, my service member shared this with me. And I was like, gold star for them, because I don't get those spouse emails.
Right.
On the receiving end, when they do arrive at Fort Leonard Wood, they typically have already, spouses are smart, we know this. So they've probably researched their schools, they've registered their kids already, they have those questions typically answered unless they're coming during the summer or a high transition period. But we do have an Arrive Strong program at Fort Leonard Wood, and so I meet with those families as they're coming in to be able to answer any lingering questions that they may have, making sure they receive the supports. If they have questions, if they have MIC3 issues because their student is transitioning hard, we have MFLEX support for those students if they need that transition as they're coming in. And so we coordinate that for those families and make sure they have those connection points and build those relationships. On the back end, I do levy briefs. So I attend the levy briefs and I brief all the soldiers that are leaving Fort Leonard Wood. It varies on how quickly they go to the levy briefs, if they've kind of drugged their feet to be able to go to that. But again, I'm talking to the service members and hoping that they're sharing the information with their families. I do call them out during those levy briefs. If they have kids pre-K through high school, I make them raise their hand. I have them fill out a referral form for me right then and there. And if they have a spouse, I ask for them to put their spouse's information. Within 48 hours, sometimes a little longer depending on my week, they'll get an email from me connecting them with their school liaison at wherever they're headed. And we have school liaisons across branches, so that's connecting them to the Air Force or the Navy or the Marine school liaisons wherever they're headed to make sure that they have those resources.
Absolutely, thank you.
But then for any of the boots in the ground, while they're stationed at Fort Leonard or any of our installations, if you have questions about MIC3, if you have those base level issues, if your student is going to or coming from a DODEA school and you're asking about pre-K supports, if you have impact aid questions and you want to know where your school district is spending those funds, we get that information directly from the school districts, and they're very apt to tell you exactly what's going on with those funds because they want to be transparent. And so your school liaison is going to be that connection point to make that happen.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Can I speak out of turn and just clarify something? So, Bridget, is this what just Bridget Plummer, school liaison extraordinaire, does? Or this is what all school liaisons in the Army that the Army gets paid for can do and should do?
Sure. So I've been told that receiving the incoming roster is pretty rare. And I think other school liaisons need to fight for that a little bit more because ACS receives it for that sponsor support. And it's a sponsor roster. I'm sure it doesn't all encompass, but I think getting that incoming roster and getting them prior to them coming to your garrison is really the key point. Transition point going out of there, I don't know if all of them attend levy briefs. I know some of them do. They typically are waiting for those families to reach out and ask for the support. And so I think that school liaisons as a whole can do a great job by making sure that we're going out and meeting those families where they're at. And a lot of times, like I said, we talk to the green suitors, we talk to the folks that are active duty, and it's typically the spouses that are home that are making those decisions. And so how do we get into those avenues, I think, is the important question, and allowing your school liaison at your installations to get to that point also.
So if I could add on to that, thank you. So I'm curious about, and we didn't plan this, so I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm curious to know what kind of relationship you have with the garrison commander.
Fantastic. So the school liaison is the installation school that communicator. So I am the liaison between the schools and our garrison commander. I have permission to speak on his behalf. I sit on the school board as the military liaison for our largest school district, and I convey to them any information that needs to happen, any situations that a parent may be going through, concerns from the school about a specific soldier or a family because a student is struggling, then I make sure that that information is directly to our garrison.
I could have guessed that you had a fantastic relationship with him or her, and I think that that's really a key as you're thinking about how this person and how this office gets more gravitas, if you will. It is, if you have a good relationship with the garrison commander and they're supporting you, then that works very well. So, yes.
One of the things, I just met Bridget, one of the things she said to me in the green room, she knew exactly how much money that Fort Leavenworth was,
Leonard Wood, yeah.
Leonard Wood was getting, and she knew that they were classified as something called heavily impacted districts. Most people don't know what that term means. The fact that she knows that shows how much her hands are in the weeds and how she is involved. And she also has a clear understanding of the importance of counting students.
100%.
Because if they were not counted, they would not fall into that category. And that category means more dollars. And how much money did you say they were receiving?
So just for the highly impacted, they had to do a tax levy this past year, and they were very transparent, had a website out to advertise all of those facts and kind of what they were advocating for. But it was $8.5 million was the difference in like half a percentage point that they were in jeopardy of losing. So that's big money for a school district.
That's huge.
Absolutely.
That's huge. So it's important to work with the SLOs. I've sent folks from my office to go to a SLOs conference, working with MISA, the Military Impacted School Association, working with NISA, the National Impacted Schools Association, NISA, the National Indian Impacted School Association, and any other association that's going to support children. We're at the point where, for the first time in the history of the program, we've made final payments during the same fiscal year. It's never happened before. And considering Impact Aid is current year funds, which means there's no budget, we have no money. We get CR money, we get a little bit of money, and we have to prorate it. So it's important that we're able to do our work so we can come out and provide technical assistance and answer questions and give support to those who have boots on the ground and can work directly with the grantees.
That's so important. I wonder if this is a good time to ask if any of the panelists here would or could differentiate Impact Aid from the Military Student Identifier. Anybody here familiar with Military Student Identifier? I see Bridget, she's like, she can't wait to answer the question. Go ahead.
Different things, but you want to take it? Yep. You want to take it? I'll just say it's two different things.
It is two different things.
It's two different things.
It is two different things.
It's clearly two different things. The Military Student Identifier, I'm not the lead at the department for this, just to be clear, but it was put in ESSA to identify that subgroup of military children to make sure they're receiving academic support and other supports that they may need. There have been confusions surrounding it, and I believe in 2020 and the National Defense Authorization Act, some clarification was provided, and I know the office that's leading some of that work, we report to the same DAS. They are working through some of those same organizations I talked about, and also the CCSSO, the chief school officers and others to provide that clarification. But that was the intent of it, which is completely different to Impact Aid. Impact Aid is to get you money, get dollars in your local school budget. Military Student Identifier, it was identifying another subgroup to help provide support. If you don't know they're there, then how can you know what type of support that they need?
And also to track their academic performance to make sure that they're staying on target with all of the moves. And do we need additional supports in place, or are the supports that are in place successful?
Yeah, and so not to track their academic performance by individual child, but In the aggregate, in the aggregate. And Bridget, can I ask, just at your location, do the schools collect information for impact aid and the military student identifiers separately? Do you know how they do that?
The largest district that we have does it all together.
Okay.
In Missouri, not every district is consistent about collecting for the military student identifier, because we have districts that don't qualify for impact aid, and so they don't collect that data. It's one of the things that's on the legislation and they're working towards, and it's been identified as kind of one of the shortfalls for Missouri. A lot of other states do fantastic with it, but it just varies by the state. Our largest district collects it at the same time.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So, and that is something about education, is there can be something like Ms. Muhammad mentioned, ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. So there's federal legislation, but then what happens at the individual state or school system varies widely. So you mentioned legislation, so I'm going to go back to Mr. Lupiba and ask you to talk about Purple Star schools.
Sure, absolutely. So we talked about, obviously, being where the child is. And we obviously know the federal government has a role for its employees, for its service member spouses, children, families. And of course, we have great nonprofits like MSEC, Military Child Education Coalition, helping all these decades. How many service members older than me, veterans, that have said, I wish I had MIC-3, I wish I had Purple Star for my kids? Countless, and just a brief amount of time that we've had MIC-3 and Purple Star. And so in that regard, kids, military kids, go to schools. So the state council, MIC-3, just said, well, then we have to come up with benchmarks. Because every school's got a Veterans Day assembly for their community, but that's one day out of the entire school year. We need something that helps us where the kids are, the military kids are, and they're going to be enrolled in every school. We have 600 plus school districts in Ohio across 88 counties. Then that means we need to go for every one of them, because at some point in the future there will be a military kid there, whether it's active, guard, reserve, or just out of the uniform, veteran, etc., sibling in the branches, and that changes a child's perspective, seeing his big brother or big sister go off to a deployment and out into the world. So we said, at the end of the day, then we need something. And so with all of those focus groups that I mentioned earlier, we came up with this criteria that everyone pretty much signed up. All the state agencies were a part of it. Obviously, the Ohio Department of Education, the Ohio Army and Air National Guard, the Ohio Department of Veterans Services, the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and the Ohio Department of Higher Education said we want to be at the table too. So all these great members of the MIC-3 State Council in Ohio said this is what we want, and this is what's signed off on by the USO, the American Legion, the PTA, all these state initiated associations. And through that long process of a year plus, they came back and said, okay, this is it. Everyone signed on to it. But we'd have no name. And so I said, well, I knew what Gold Star and Blue Star meant. And obviously, since 1986, the Secretary of Defense has been calling purple the color of the military child. So it's quick to go to veterans of different generations that I knew personally and said, what do you think about Purple Star? Would you be okay with that? And everyone signed off on that. And so the quick of it is there are 600 Purple Star schools in Ohio in a very short period of time, and where the kids are, whether that's public school, private school, preschools, career tech educational centers, which we talked about education as far as that, what we used to call JVS, Joint Vocational Education. And then, of course, our great governor said, okay, this is where we're at now, but what's next, Lupiba? What can we do more? And I, of course, had Collegiate Purple Star in my mind. And that was quick, and it's been 2.5 years that we've had Collegiate Purple Star with a couple states replicating as well. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the 2-minute shtick on Purple Star. And with 45 Purple Star states, I'm pretty impressed that just like the Wright brothers, someone's following our lead.
Yes. Yeah, and we're appreciative of you taking the lead on that. So thanks for that. Okay, I've got like a stack of questions that have been coming in from folks online and here in the room, and I'm going to try to put them together to get some answers here. So, Ms. Pickle, I'm looking at you. There are questions about support for military kids OCONUS around, and I'm going to go two different directions. One, and you can talk to whatever you can on this. One has to do with the athletes who are over there, and how do we get those athletes more exposure to colleges, so that they, might be competitive for a scholarship. And then does DoDEA do anything to support military kids who are homeschooled overseas? That's two very different, but let me turn it to you.
Sure, absolutely. And hopefully I can touch into both of them. But first off, the homeschooling, yes. Our homeschool families can come to a DoDEA school. They can be enrolled in any of the extracurriculars, any of the co-curriculars that they would want to be in. So yes, differences, you gotta come. So again, it's that reach out. Do we advertise? Do we make sure it's there? As far as extracurriculars and being seen from a college level, we see this all the time. We have a program, School Links, in which our kids plan out their 6 years. And within that, we also have an opportunity for them to look at what are the sports that they want to look into, where do they want to go. So they're able to do some of the athletic pieces. And then we've had the one incident that I'm thinking of during COVID is we had a young lady in Europe who wanted to try out for a cheerleading team, a collegiate cheerleading team. The university came over to do the actual application process. It was the middle of COVID. Could we open the schools? Could we have those particular pieces come in, as opposed to doing a video of her and going through it? And we were able to coordinate that. Do we have the opportunities that we have stateside? No. We don't have as many. We try to provide as much as we can through the school level, but also through our partnerships with family and community, MWR, the different pieces that we can have. Our athletes do travel. Sometimes travel means getting on a plane and going from one installation to another to compete. Try to provide that as much as we can. We have a few famous athletes that were in DoDEA schools off the top of my head. I can't think of all of them, but we have had a few that have been there, but we try to offer as many opportunities as we can, both curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular, depending upon the installation, depending upon the partnerships that we have in those installations. I'm sure if that's
I think that's great. Thanks for taking those two very divergent questions. Okay, now I'm switching over. Well, actually, there's one question like this for Ms. Plummer, but also there is a similar question that says any and all of you. So for military families who either PCS from a highly engaged school liaison officer to some place where they're not as highly engaged, or if they go to a place that's just, I'm thinking recruiting command, ROTC instruction, if they go someplace where maybe they're not near an installation, what can military families do to facilitate transition in those instances?
We have had families that have moved from Fort Leonard Wood to locations where there's not a school liaison. And I've also had school liaisons reach out to me and say, hey, we have a family moving to Columbia to do recruiting command at the college. There's not a school liaison there. There's myself, and there's one at Whiteman Air Force Base up near Kansas City. So we work together to find out who has connections in that area, and if we don't already have connections established, then we make the connections to make sure that family has the resources that they need. How do they register? What needs to happen? What kind of information does that school need for prior registration? Advanced registration is a really big selling point for military families to make sure that they can get in and get situated before they arrive. So I think not having a school liaison on ground in their city is super detrimental. I think the school liaison just needs to do a little bit more legwork to make sure they have those same resources. And then moving from a garrison that has an active school liaison program to a garrison that's not, I'd say put the pressure on. Yeah. School liaisons love their job. They really do. We say it's the best one in the Army, and we'll stand on that ground. So I would say pressure them. Hey, I had this resource at my previous garrison. Why don't we have that here? Can we make sure that that's something that can happen? We fall under the CYS umbrella, so we're under Child and Youth Services, so we fall under MWR at all of those family programs. So if we can't make it happen as a school liaison officer and that's a resource that's needed in your community, then I think it's worthwhile to bring up to your garrison to make sure that it can be available.
Yeah, thanks for that. And
Along the lines of that.
Go ahead.
Ask.
If there is a Purple Star school there, you have a dedicated local educator that took professional development and can bridge what you don't have with an installation or a base and that infrastructure, because she or he is dedicated, because they took the professional development and understands a little bit more than what the average military or kid is by knowing what a military kid is all about. And so if we get Purple Star schools from the Atlantic to the Pacific, I think that will help that military kid just a little bit more.
I love how you tied that in, because, I mean, so a lot of the things that we're talking about up here are kind of just their concepts. They can feel a little bit abstract, but when you talk about how Purple Star School can be helpful, or what DODEA can do, I think that's really helpful. I'll just another resource for an area where there isn't a school liaison, or if a school liaison needs a hand, is MSEC. We have some services that can help with that too, and we're always happy to do that. I want to go back to Lori, Ms. Pickle, here for a second, and ask if you can talk about innovative approaches that are being taken for the DODEA teacher hiring project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. A few years back, we started looking at, do we have highly qualified teachers in every one of our classrooms on day one? And we can, as you can imagine, overseas, the host security piece, getting them hired, getting folks in, getting the professional development, making sure we're there. We were starting a lot of our school years with long-term subs. And so our initiative started looking at why? What is the holdup? What's happening here? And so we did look at internally, from a DODEA standpoint, what are we doing? A lot of times we look across. DODEA is like its own state. We operate as a state educational activity and a local education activity. So we're like, hey, who's the problem? Hey, might be us. What are we doing? What are we expecting? So we looked at some of our internal processes. One of the big processes that we looked at was state reciprocity. And this was a major coup for the military spouse, knowing that myself, jumping from 5 different states, and every time I jumped, I had to go through another hoop to get a certificate, that we actually said, if you have a state certificate in education, we're going to take 100% reciprocity. As opposed to prior than that, we're only taking 50%. And then you have to do this and this and this to get a DODEA certificate. So looked at those types of practices. We also looked at just in resources. What is the holdup? Is it from the time the RPA goes out? Is it the security piece? Which is it? And we were able to identify some resources there. We also stood up strategic sourcing that now is out at several career installation, career fairs, different places, going to the universities, going to different conferences and saying, come teach for us, come. The other thing that we did was do the same thing for para-educators. We have the need for para-educators, and the opportunity to step into a classroom is vital. We have a community soup in Guam, community superintendent, who started as a spouse, as a paraprofessional, when her youngest child started in kindergarten in a DODEA school, and worked them through. We have the opportunity to get the word out. And earlier when we walked in, I heard him talking about the different spouse resources to go to look for those types of things. And we're doing it outside of the typical PCS move. So we can look ahead and our educators can get in the loop up front.
No, that's a good, it's sort of a grassroots effort, for at least within DODEA.
Yeah,
so.
We actually this year, I mean, it was a big moment for us, 98% on the day that school started. We had highly qualified teachers in classrooms, which was incredible all the way around, and that was across ODA.
Well, clearly the education issues are very complex, and I think back to some of the training I've had or education I've had about whole of government, and so I want to turn it over to Ms. Muhammad and say, can you tell us about interagency efforts that the Department of Education is taking to try to solve these problems?
There are several interagency initiatives going on. I'll focus on one that's probably closer to this audience. With the First Lady's mission of serving our military families, we have joining forces, and during the last 4 years, we have worked across agencies and including outside agencies such as MIC3 and others. One of the things we focused on during the first year and a half was on developing resources for educators who educate children in caregiving households. Because for the educator to understand the needs of that child that may be absent from school because he or she has to take a parent to the doctor or provide medication for that parent or can't do other things. So providing resources for the educator to help that child and have that understanding. And then the reissuing of the letter for support for the Interstate Compact. Right now we're working with the staff, we work with HHS, we've worked with even Social Security and other federal agencies, because some of the things you may think about that you wouldn't think about for military children or federally connected children or just children in general. And you think about if a child becomes homeless. We have military children who can become homeless. So we have to make sure that those states and LEAs are adhering to the policies for that child, what must be in place, how they must provide transportation for that child, or any other statutory requirements. Right now, there's a lot of collaboration going on with the State Department, our Office of Special Education, our technology office, and this particular focus is on transitioning of IPP information as our military children with disability transition from school to school. So I think those are critical, and they don't live in one federal agency, and sharing resources and not duplicating efforts can help. And at least we're having the conversations, we're developing processes, or we have procedures in place to continue. Even within the Department of Ed, we had all these different people working on this stuff, and I was like, I hate things when they're not organized. So the Assistant Secretary said, well, move forward, and I just pulled all the different offices together, and it's like, well, what are you doing? We're counting data here. Well, what are you doing? We're speaking to this other agency about the cybersecurity aspect of this. So that's just an example of some of the interagency work that we're doing.
Yeah, and it's so important. So what I want to do is just in the last couple minutes that we have, I'd like each of you to take 90 seconds to let the audience know what you want them to know. I'm gonna start with you, Ms. Plummer, and if you want to take 120 seconds, go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's important to know that your school liaisons are at your installations for support. So if you find that there's a way that is not currently being supported and you feel would be useful, then reach out to your school liaison so they can put those things into place. At our installation, teen programs and teen opportunities were really lacking. There's not much to do around our garrison. And so I partnered with our youth center and then with our education center to put together a couple of programs. We did a lock-in at the museum on the installation. We had 60 teenagers with tasks and missions. We're doing a Day of the Dead late night where we're touring and getting a history lesson of the cemeteries on our installation that predate Fort Leonard Wood. We did a teen pool party to give them education resources and get them ready for the first day of school. So just providing kind of the need that's in your community and being willing to kind of step outside those blocks. And if you have something in your community or in your schools that you've noticed and you have questions about, reach out to your school liaisons. They're really there for support.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Muhammad.
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here to speak on behalf of the Impact Aid program. As I stated in the beginning, it's a $1.6 billion program that still isn't fully funded. So what I need you to do is to ask questions, to be an advocate for your school, to be an advocate for your students. If you don't understand, please use, I think they have the little scanners up there, the QR codes. Please feel free to reach out. We want to make sure we're getting the right money to the right schools for the right amount. We want to make sure every federally connected child, which includes the military connected child, is counted when we get those survey forms back for the children. And the presentation that was going on before, and thinking about what you were talking about, Lori, on my staff right now, I have 6 folks that are analysts out of the 18 that have served or are still serving because they're the spouse of someone who is currently serving. I recently hired someone even from who's the spouse of a space cadet. I was like, oh, okay, Space Forces. So they're committed to the work of Impact Aid because of the work and their commitment. So my staff loves the work that they do, and we're here to serve, so reach out.
Thank you. Ms. Pickle.
Absolutely. I want to echo, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for wanting to know a little bit more about DODEA. Love that I'm sitting between these two folks, because Impact Aid and the Military State Compact is huge when you're transitioning in and out of DODEA. And making sure that we have the smoothest transition for our children. I mean, that's the bottom line up front. And basically some of the things that we talked about today had to do with, you got to ask the right questions. You got to advocate for your child. You are their best person. So going into not only a SLO, but if the SLO is not there, going into that school, asking about that school, going to the Child and Youth Services, asking about the community, finding out about that educational piece. Be that person who is there asking the questions, because we want to be able to help our children be as resilient as they can as they serve and transition from school system to school system. And look us up, DODEA. We're working it. Thank you again.
Thanks. Pete.
Thank you, Team Navy. Every school in America should be a Purple Star school because they will have a military kid.
Yep.
Or they already have a military kid. And often they have dozens of military kids, Guard, Reserve, active duty. And here's why. Because the Purple Star school liaison educator, who is already a full-time employed coach, counselor, and educator, has got that professional development, has got his phone number and email address out on the school website, and they are talking to their military kids every day of the school year that military kid is enrolled at their Purple Star school. So again, every school in America should be a Purple Star school because it becomes culture and climate and civics, but the military kid can lead with his own way, like the S2S program from the great MSEC as the national advocate of Purple Star. So that's what I want to leave to you, that every school in America should be Purple Star because it is about the brave, resilient kids that are military kids. But at the end of the day, it's the least we can do as educators and communities to become Purple Star.
Thanks, Pete. So, I mean, obviously a wealth of information here, and I want to call your attention to the QR codes that are on the screen. And I also want to let you know, we have a whole bunch of questions that we didn't get to. And you'll be happy to know that the panelists said to me before we came out here, will we have an opportunity to answer the questions that we don't get to? And absolutely we will. So thank you to everyone who did put in a question. I mean, obviously you're concerned about this issue and very invested in your kids' education. And so please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you again, Dr. Porter. I really appreciate that. And to our panelists, thank you so much. I know she just asked you to give them applause, but can we give them one more? They did an awesome job. No. So wow, we heard a lot of valuable resources today, and our panelists, we hope that you saw the resources that's still right here. We do, as I saw you when I would come up. So as Holly mentioned earlier, we will have these resources up on our social media pages. So just as we continue to go through annual meeting, just look for those to be up on our pages. And speaking of important resources, on your way out, there's a table right outside of our door front for more employment and education resources. Also, we have our tote bags. We have them every year, so I know you're looking forward to have one. They're full of resources from our panelists and also from our exhibitors that we have downstairs. We do have a family readiness pavilion downstairs, and on the outside of the door, we put a board there so you can see all of those our community partners that are there. So please do, we ask you to go down and stop by and see them. Reminder to click on the Warfighter and Family Forum feedback QR code. Right now it's available in person on your question cards. They're also on the boards on the way outside of the door, and they're also online for those who are watching virtually. Provide us your feedback, and as soon as you finish completing the feedback information, there will be an access to another resource page that for those people who aren't here, the resources that we have in those tote bags, we also have them available for you online. Finally, one more final, but on your way out, please stop by and see Mrs. Perkins. She's outside signing our TOSH books, the Army Spouse Handbook. They are complimentary to you, so you can stop by her table and she will sign one for you. They're a gift for you. So please join us tomorrow. We have 2 more family forums. Family Forum 2, Transforming Combat Ready Care at 09:30 Eastern Time. And tomorrow afternoon, we will have our Army Senior Leader Fireside Chat with the theme, Taking Care of People, starting at 1500. Both forums will be back in this room tomorrow, here and online on our Facebook page. So please come back. I look forward to seeing you all. Have a wonderful evening.